Okay, cool. So welcome everybody. And yes, my books are gone. Some people are being traumatized by this. I've gotten on a couple of Zooms with people. They're like, wait a minute, what's happening? There's there's such familiarity with my scene, but the books are gone and the move is in progress. We're packing up and we are out of San Diego in 19 days. In 19 days, and we're off to Austin, Texas. So amazing, crazy. Here we go. Grateful for the flexibility that this business gives us. Okay, so I was having a conversation with a friend yesterday, and it's a conversation that comes up fairly regularly. And it's a thing that I believe prevents a lot of people from creating the results that they deserve to create in their lives. And it typically starts with a very, very simple singular question that I love to ask pretty much everyone that I talk with for the most part. And that simple question is, what do you want? What do you want? When I get on a Zoom call with someone who's taking a look at the opportunity or whatever it may be, or if I'm just connecting with a person in general, or I'm talking to a friend of mine, more often than not, I'll just come back to a very simple question of, what do you want? And drop a one in the chat box if you've ever done this yourself, or if you've had this experience where the person answers a question, and it's very normal to do this. So I just want to make sure that you hear me loud and clear. It's very normal that people do this, but the default setting of why we do this is what we're going to talk about tonight. And what happens is people say things like, well, I don't want to have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to go to work anymore. I don't want to have to miss my kids, games on the weekends. I don't want to have to, make more than 2 or 3 stops when I fly because that's the cheapest ticket for me to get somewhere. I don't want to have a roommate anymore. I don't want to. So drop one in the chat box if you are all familiar with, at times in your life or when talking with other people, you kind of communicate in that way. I don't want. And it's, again, like I said, it's a fairly normal response, right? So for example, how many of you drop a 2 in the chat box? How many of you don't want people to how many of you don't want people to take so long anymore when it comes to getting started in Isagenix? Just drop a 2 in the chat box. Like, how many of you just don't want it to take so long, right? Yeah. And how many of you just just don't want to work at your job anymore, or whatever it may be, right? Okay. So here's the funny thing about coming from a place of I don't want. When we come from a place of I don't want, we're actually creating more of what is it that we don't want. And why is that? Because the way that, you can call it whatever you want, law of attraction, quantum physics, whatever it is, the way that it works is what we focus on, we get more of. So how many of you have had the experience of, God, I don't want to have to deal with the stress of my job anymore. And then all of a sudden it feels like the stress level at your job went from what was already a 7 to like a 25 on the scale. Drop a 3 in the chat box if you ever had that experience, right? I just don't want the stress of my job anymore. I don't want the toxic workplace. I don't. And then all of a sudden, all you notice is the continuation of, or the exacerbation of, the very thing that you're seeking to avoid. And so the reason we do that is because so many of us, unfortunately, and just reality, are raised with somewhat of a negative set point in terms of the lens through which we view the world. And why is that? Well, think about how we're raised. What's the number one word that children hear? The number one word that children hear, no matter how great of a parent you have, is no. Don't do that. No, don't jump there. No, don't eat that. No, don't touch that. No, don't play with that person. No, don't be home too late. No. So we tend to get programmed to have a little bit of a negative set point. And so I want you to start to ask the question of, okay, well, I'm clear on what it is that I don't want, but I don't want to continue more of that in my life. So then it begs the question of really answering the question of, what do you want? And how many of you just drop a 4 in the chat box, and no wrong answers here. How many of you have never taken the time since you've started your Isagenix business to just get real still and real quiet And you can do it with a journal open, or you can do it in some sort of silent meditation if you want. You can do it while walking outside or wherever you find a bit of peace. But how many of you, just drop a 4 in the chat box, have never really sat down and taken the time to get really clear on, what do I want? What do I want? What do I actually want? Now, thank you for being honest, because that's not an easy question to answer. So I appreciate your honesty. Okay. And then just so they know they're not alone, for those of you that have done that exercise, how many of you, drop a 5 in the chat box, how many of you along the way of your journey have maybe come to a point, or at one point along the way got kind of woken up and gone, wait a minute, this isn't what I want at all. I'm driven by very, very, very different things now in my life. I've achieved XYZ result, and now I have to learn how to relate to what I want in a whole new way. Okay, so even playing field, level playing field for everyone that's watching. And so my invitation to both groups of people, because if you notice you fall back into the exact same place, is spend some time to get really, really clear on what you want. And the reason it's important to spend some time on getting clear in terms of what it is that you want is because when you start to get clear on what it is that you want, the things that you don't want magically start to move out of the way. And the reason they start to move out of the way, and the reason they can't find their way to you, is because, like I talked about before, we work like a magnet. Again, quantum physics, law of attraction, whether you want to go science or new age, spirituality, doesn't make a difference. It's all going to end up in the same place. And that's right back to us. And so as we get clear on what I do want, not only do we start to move those things out of the way and start to really create space in terms of allowing a new flow to come into us, but we do something that's even more powerful than that, and that's that we actually start to set a new standard. We start to set a new standard. And what I mean by that is we start to recognize that the results that we're creating by making choices that are in alignment with what we do want, as opposed to being focused on what we don't want, feel good to us. They're rewarding. They're fulfilling. They lend themselves to contentment, happiness, joy, right? Because we feel like we're making progress. Versus when I'm focused completely on what I don't want, what am I more often than not experiencing? Resentment, frustration, anxiety, fear, displacement, detachment, depression, apathy, right? The whole thing. So again, that's the power of clarity. Now, some of you might be sitting here saying, well, I'm not entirely sure what I do want, okay? Because oftentimes we don't know what we want necessarily. And why don't we know what we want? Because, let's not get it twisted, we've been raised in a culture and a society that tries to keep us as limited as possible to think in a very, very compact way. And so just to do a little easy exercise, if you're struggling to get clear on what it is that you do want, it's really simple. Take a look at what you don't want and then just flip to the opposite, right? So just do some semantic interchange, right? I don't want to feel stressed all the time. Okay, well, what's the opposite of that? I want to experience harmony more frequently. Do you notice the difference in the energy of that too? I don't want to feel so stressed. I want to experience more harmony. Just the way your vibrational frequency will change when you change the words that you're using is going to significantly increase the clarity, the ease with which you start to attract things into your life. But more importantly, coming back to what I was saying before, and this is really, really a big thing that not enough people, I think, focus on, coming back to the standard. See, when you start to set a new standard for yourself, because you're now making choices that are in alignment with who you want to become as opposed to who you think you're supposed to be in the world, your choices become more aligned you come from a greater place of joy by far. You're way more impactful. You're way more productive. You're way more creative. You're way more influential 100% of the time, that I assure you. But the other thing that starts to happen is when you get presented with opportunities or choices, you'll really, for the most part, only ever start to see one choice. And that's the choice that meets my standard at this point. Drop a 5 in the chat box if this is landing for you all this evening. I just want to, it's hard on Zoom sometimes. Okay. Cool. Now, the other thing that starts to happen when we create a greater amount of clarity and focus on the things that we do want is not only do some of those things that have been consuming us daily, tightening us up, contracting us, constricting us, literally blocking us from creating and attracting the things that we do desire in our lives, and leading to anxiety and frustration and fear and all the things that we talked about. But then what begins to happen is your level of self-leadership and the degree to which that increases is exponential and rapid. And then what begins to happen is people start to observe your behavior and they notice what you're living into. And that is what they're going to be most interested in being a part of. So when we learn to lead ourselves and we learn to get clear on what it is that we do want, and we learn to clear out the bullshit, and we learn to make choices that are in alignment with who we want to become, not who we think we were supposed to have been, and we start to create a new standard, and we start to trust ourselves to make that choice consistently, that's when people start to come to you and say, I don't care if you're selling collagen or if you're selling animal crackers, I want to be a part of this thing. And I actually think animal crackers is a fair thing to plug in there, because who doesn't love animal crackers? I mean, it'd be a great product, right? Not from the business model, but I mean, I'm not saying no to animal crackers any day of the week. But anyway, you know my point, right? So all of this, believe it or not, being focused on what you don't want, believe it or not, is denying you from attracting people into your space who either aren't entirely sure what they're looking for, they're not sure what they want, but they're looking for some demonstration of what clarity can look like, and that can come from your example and your leadership, or they are clear on what they want, and what they identify in you is an aligned partner who's committed to making similar choices along the personal path to progress. And that's when you start to create really bonded leadership. And that's when you start to really create a team that's going to excite you. And that's when you start to create an environment where you have more business than you can handle, because essentially what you've put yourself in a position to do is only bring in what it is that you want. Now, are there going to be times still, no matter how clear you are, no matter what, because you guys know me, I'm not airy-fairy in that way. Like, you got to put in the work. Are there going to be times, no matter what, that you're still going to have people that come in? There might be a rotten apple. They might be negative Nancy's, whatever it may be, of course. But the higher you hold yourself to that new standard of this is what I want, and this is who I'm committed to becoming, and these are my values, and this is the direction I'm headed in, things will start to open up exponentially. So often we hear about the compound effect in network marketing, right? We do. We hear about first year is a grind, second year a grind, third year it starts to compound and starts to open up a little bit more, right? 5 years, 7 years, now we're really seeing the impact. But if you pay close attention to the people in this company or to successful people that you see, if you had the ability to study their journey and their trajectory, I can almost assure you that who they are today versus who they were when they started are night and day. And the clarity on that path, night and day. And so for those of you that typed a 4 in the chat box when I asked the question of how many of you have never really taken the time to seek out that clarity or to really look into what do you want, here's where you're limiting yourself. And I'm going to speak to the group that was number 5 as well. Here's where you're limiting yourself. You're essentially putting yourself in a position where Isagenix is really just a job for you. It's a way to make money. You like being a part of the community. And so you go through the motions of doing the do and doing the IPAs, and it makes a little bit of money. But it's also what's going to leave you susceptible to starting and stopping, being inconsistent, which is redundant because I just said starting and stopping. Okay. So being inconsistent, not owning your voice, not communicating a bigger message, not being loud and proud about what it is that you're doing. And why? Because you're not being pulled by anything. And that's okay. It's not your fault. Why isn't it your fault? Because most people that are in that number 4 category kind of get into network marketing for those reasons. You find a product that you love, find out you can make a little bit of money telling your friends about it. Next thing you know, here you are on this, on these team calls, plugging into this thing that you've never done before. And so it's really normal to operate in that way. But what might happen for you if you start to take real ownership of what it is that you want to create in this world? And what if this is the place? What if this is the environment? What if this is the laboratory, if you will, in which you can not only get clear on what it is that you want, but actually be in a vehicle that's been proven for the last 19 years, rock solid, to show you how to get to that place, what might be possible for you. And for those of you that said number 5, well, one of the greatest challenges you'll ever experience in this business and as an entrepreneur and as a business person in general is every 5, 6, 7 years, be prepared to kind of reinvent what that thing is for you and find a new clarity and really start to sit down and reassess, how do I relate to the business and where am I at this point in my career and what do I want from this point forward? And am I still inspired by the same things that inspired me in the past, or are there new things that I'm excited to be inspired by? Do I have a new vision? Do I have a new mission? Because maybe when you first started, you just needed to breathe a little bit of oxygen, financially speaking, and that's all you could focus on. And that's okay. Some of you might be there right now, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're clear that what you want right now is more money, totally okay. Nothing wrong with that. You will never hear Eden or I ever ask you to apologize for desiring prosperity in your life and more money. Never, ever. If anything, we'll encourage you to think bigger about it over and over and over again until. So that's it for tonight. I don't know. That's just what made sense to talk about this evening with you all. So really check in. What do you want? How do you want to relate to this? And what are you focused on? And can you find a way to get excited in a whole new way? Because like Albert Einstein said, imagination is more powerful than knowledge. And I know that to be true. And what I also know about my wife and myself is that we both fall into this category. Yes, Eden and I are hard workers. Well, not as much as I used to be. No, because I don't really like working. We've talked about this openly. But we always hustled. We always worked hard. But I really believe, and statistically, we know this to be true as well, statistically, Eden and I shouldn't have ended up where we ended up, just based on our backgrounds. I'm convinced that the only reason I landed where I landed is not because I'm the smartest guy in this company. I'm not, by far. I'm not the best speaker. I'm not the most skilled salesperson. I'm not. It's just that I started to ask myself the question when I was younger of, what if? And why not me? Like, yeah, I get it. Like, I get that, I get that you wouldn't bet on me. I get that. But I also learned a long time ago that somebody else's belief in you is not a necessity, it's a luxury. Somebody else's belief in you is not a necessity, it's a luxury. It's a luxury. Your belief in you, only thing that matters. And when you get clear on what it is that you want and where it is that you're going, I promise you, I guarantee you, I assure you with all of my heart and all of my being, you will source people, including people that are already in your existence right now, literally in front of you, that will support you in that journey until, because that's how the thing goes. So with that, I bid you adieu. Have a great evening. I'm going to post in the group, what did you learn? If you learned anything, then great, drop it in the chat box. If you didn't, it's all good as well. We'll see you guys soon. Have a great evening. Thank you for your leadership. Much love. Peace.